This video is on the 7 mysteries of the Jonathan Majors case with regard to his ex-girlfriend, Grace Jabari. Once again, this is the most famous misdemeanor case in history. It just goes on and on and on. There are a lot of mysteries. I'm going to look at 7. On April 3rd, we learned that Judge Michael Gaffey denied the motion to set aside the verdict in Jonathan Majors' case. So Jonathan Majors will be sentenced in this misdemeanor case on April 8, 2024. The reason I use the John Majors case is that it is a perfect example of so many of the problems in our justice system. Yes, John Majors is a movie star. Yes, he's an actor, but there's a lot of commonality here with a lot of the cases that we see in the justice system, particularly when it is pointed at Black males. So the first question becomes, how did this case get into a courtroom? I've been thoroughly enjoying the Native Pod podcast, particularly the comments recently by my friend Angela Rye, who hits the nail right on the head with regard to the Marilyn Mosby case, but also some comments made by the former mayor of Tallahassee, Andrew Gillum, who went through something that I think is extremely, extremely suspicious.
Because I think the greatest offense occurred when you pull back to there ever being charges in the first place.
Exactly
I would like to know.
Check out Native Land Pod. And that becomes the question in the Majors case as well. How did it get into a courtroom? Who decided that? Why did a misdemeanor case come into a full-blown trial that's making national headlines? Yes, it's a famous person, but still, you would think the law should be applied somewhat equally, although we know that that's not functionally true, to everybody, particularly when we're dealing with a misdemeanor case. We're not dealing with serious violent crime here. We're not dealing with a felony. We're dealing with a misdemeanor. Also, check out this interview with Judy Kluger. And the reason that Judy Kluger is important is because her organization, Sanctuary for Families, is involved in the Majors case. There's an attorney from the organization representing Grace Jabari. The organization is putting up all sorts of content using Majors' case as really sort of a promotional tool. This is relevant because on October 24, 2023, Alvin Bragg's office announced that Judy Kluger's organization would be part of a special advisory group advising the Manhattan DA's office. That happened right as the Majors case was getting into full swing. Actually, it happened right near the time that Grace Jabari was arrested for allegedly assaulting Jonathan Majors. So remember, the advisory group is set up on October 24. So Judy Kluger is advising the Manhattan DA's office. That's announced on October 24, 2023. And in the news on the 25th and 26th is the arrest of Grace Jabari for allegedly assaulting Jonathan Majors. So it was actually the same week. So it's interesting to see a former judge who is advising the Manhattan DA's office. Judy Kluger and her group is formally advising the Manhattan DA's office. And an attorney from retired Judge Judy Kluger's group is representing Ms. Jabari.
Women, when the men are star athletes or when they are college students who seem to have a lot of future promise, because, we don't want to ruin the future prospects of promising men. Do you think that is something that exists?
I hope not, but I think the fact is that people who are more recognized in society as being successful sometimes get a pass when they do something wrong, and we really have to change that.
So the question of how a misdemeanor case gets blown up to this level is probably answered by all of these ties and connections. In the case of the Jonathan Majors case, you have to ask the questions. How many times did Cyrus Vance or Robert Morgenthau or Alvin Bragg bring into a courtroom a misdemeanor assault case? Remembering that our old boy there, Alec Baldwin, almost didn't get charged at all, and somebody was shot dead. And yeah, I know, yes, it was likely a mistake. I get all that, but someone's dead and there's no charges at all. And finally, they did charge him with involuntary manslaughter. But Majors, this got pushed into the public eye as a misdemeanor. I would love to know how many misdemeanor assault cases Alvin Bragg actually brings into court. The second question in the Majors case, why was there no plea offer? First of all, you've got a misdemeanor case, and then there's no plea offer. Like they really wanted to have this in court is what that looks like. They really wanted to bring this to court. That's unusual. Number 5. In the mysteries of the John Majors case, why was the police body worn camera having no audio attached to that? And the audio is a key thing because you can see some of the hand motions and the hand gestures made by cops that showed up at Jonathan Majors's home in Chelsea in New York. And there's a lot of talking, as there would be in such a situation. Yet nobody can hear what they're saying. You would think that would be highly, highly relevant in the case. And somehow the police body worn camera and the words by Ms. Jabari and Mr. Majors are not to be heard. The only thing that we hear is the top of this situation when Jonathan Majors calls the police.
How he couldn't get into the apartment.
I banged on the door. I've been at the apartment for about 40 minutes now. I couldn't get in. I finally went downstairs and asked the doorman to help us. They let me in via the handyman.
In fear that his ex-girlfriend has somehow harmed herself after spending the night, by the way, at a hotel up on 77th Street in an effort to stay away from her. One of the most media suppressed bits of info of the entire trial was that Majors' ex-girlfriend, Grace Jabari, was taken to Bellevue by a New York City police officer. The only reason I stumbled into the info was watching Chillmonger speak on what Danny Atherton had reported. I would later hear about Miss Jabari's Bellevue visit when I was in the courtroom, and attorney Priya Chandri mentioned it because one of the prosecution's witnesses brought it up. Even the Wikipedia page mentions that Bellevue is another way of saying someone is crazy without saying it. Now, to be clear, Bellevue Hospital treats all types of patients. It's not just a psychiatric hospital. But one of the mysteries of the misdemeanor Majors case is why the Bellevue Hospital visit on the night in question by his ex-girlfriend wasn't more widely reported. I just can't.
Or did you see the specifics of why the injury photos didn't come in?
The specifics of why the injury? No, I did not. This is a clip of a February 24, 2024 discussion on Danny Atherton's channel. Daniel Atherton is like one of the few people who is in the courtroom almost every single day of the Jonathan Majors case that isn't part of corporate media. And along in this discussion is Kat, who is one of the best at reading the court documents every time they come out in the Majors case, and Pam Entertainment. And you should be following all of these channels if, in fact, you are very interested in some of the analysis, legal, social, and with regard to Marvel Comics. All of that from these channels is happening right now with regard, and has been happening long before I came on the scene, has been happening for about a year with regard to Jonathan Majors.
The digital evidence analyst testified that everything is gravy about everything that the DA wanted to submit. The DA directed them to make this specific type of compilation video. But when it comes to just those 3 photos, because they were pulled from Jonathan Majors' iCloud, they were in Pacific Standard Time. So he's not sure about the accuracy of the time.
Why were the photos of Jonathan Majors' injuries made into a big, huge secret? Another big tell in terms of what gets reported and what doesn't get reported by certain media that were presented by Jonathan Majors and his attorneys to the police, which is why Grace Jabari ends up getting arrested. But then the Manhattan DA's office decided not to charge her with anything. But there were photos of his injuries. And then that turned into a big secret that nobody wanted to report. Very interesting stuff by the media on this. And it shows you the bias and what direction that bias is going in. Because Alvin Bragg ran as a progressive prosecutor. He was saying things like, we need to concentrate on racial justice. We need to be very aware of the prosecutions that we select. And then he gets into office and we get these 3 cases right up front involving 3 Black men. So you got to wonder, and I think the question should be asked, particularly, if he goes into another election, which I'm sure he will. Has Alvin Bragg abandoned racial justice, particularly when it's around anything involving SA or R? Because, and yes, I'm talking in code because YouTube punishes creators that don't talk in code on these serious topics. When it comes to certain crimes, has Alvin Bragg abandoned racial justice? That's just a simple question. Remembering that, of course, Jonathan Majors is getting prosecuted for placing somebody in the back of an SUV. He's not getting prosecuted from some major serious crime, which makes this even more of a bigger question. Is the Manhattan DA's office now prosecuting anything, and particularly something that involves someone that is prominent? Because this sure as hell looks like the answer to all of that is yes. When you look at Alvin Bragg's website, you see some pretty serious crimes listed, and you say to yourself, wow, he's prosecuting stuff that really should be prosecuted. No problem. Nobody's going to have any disagreement. But it makes the fact that Majors is being prosecuted all that more strange. Maybe he feels like I've got to prosecute everybody no matter what, no matter whether or not it feels like there's some sort of bias, racial bias toward that prosecution. The reason I'm asking, too, is the facts in the Majors case and in the Porter case and in the Kevin Foss case did not add up in terms of what you would define as a slam dunk. I mean, none of them were slam dunks. And in fact, in the Majors case in particular, a lot of evidence that went in his direction. Now, of course, you wouldn't know that reading the media, which is why you have to rely on a bunch of folks sitting on YouTube who have detailed this case out. But there's a tie-in with regard to the media and what the media reports and doesn't report, because frankly, a lot of these media organizations have had fiduciary relationships with the Time's Up movement. Time's Up is now defunct, but they have financial relationships with the Time's Up movement in terms of sponsorships and, CBS giving Time's Up $8 million and stuff like that. So there's a social pressure to not question anything around these allegations. And so one has to wonder, has Alvin Bragg abandoned the racial justice part of his way of doing business, or what he claimed he was going to do when he got into office? Okay, well, number one for me, it's pretty easy on this case. Insane. How the hell does a video of a man who's supposed to be the aggressor in the story running down the street from his girlfriend, down the streets of New York, how is that not relevant? Let me tell you, if it wasn't for TMZ and Inside Edition, I don't know that we would have known about the video. I mean, TMZ really ran it extensively. But the court, everybody else tried to pretend they didn't see it. New York Times pretended they didn't see it. Rolling Stone, no big deal. I mean, can you imagine for 1 second if this was reversed? If Jonathan Majors was running down the street after Grace Jabari? I mean, come on. To me, this is like Alice in Wonderland, that this video was not a total showstopper of the case. I mean, this should have stopped the entire trial in its tracks. It's like one of these things that everybody's trying to pretend they don't see. And in every piece that you read about the Majors case, nobody, we're not going to bring that up. That, yeah, that's right. She was chasing him down. He's trying to actively, physically get away from her, and then ends up that night spending the night in a hotel up on 77th Street. His place is in Chelsea. She gets into the place in Chelsea. And then the other thing that got ignored, I should have added this to the list. He sends her a text message. Goodbye, Grace. Did you leave the keys? And then somehow that doesn't get noticed at trial. I mean, but the video of them running around is just incredible. So that's the top 7 of the mysteries of the Majors case. More to come. Good luck.